used to always go camping in the spring, my brother and I. We could get away with it because we grew up in Southern California, so it's basically always camping weather. Used to. The past tense being that my brother's not around anymore. He's since died. He died in all of this COVID stuff, actually. He just needed some treatments, Things he couldn't be getting for a while there. Vital stuff, you start to see that. Just a little too late. Well, I'm pushing 50, and he was about 6 years older than me. We weren't exactly going camping regularly when he passed anyhow. But when we were, our only rule was a new place every year. Plenty of places for us to set up for a few days. Plenty of places where we didn't really need to hit the same spot twice. Too much to see or whatever. We'd either go northeast towards Big Bear or just south a little bit towards Cleveland National Forest. Well, this particular year we camped inside of Joshua Tree Park. We'd been in the area before, just an entirely different area of the park. This area was Indian Cove Campground. Real nice place. Not sure if it's still the case on account of us never going back. The whole place is right off one of the main highways into the park, and Joshua Tree in this area resembles a desert. There aren't a lot of trees around in this area, so this wasn't us in the middle of the forest. Essentially, it's a cove of rock formations. Where we set up was in the middle of the camp, the rocks forming a sort of horseshoe around us. A small hike up and around the rocks would take you to the restrooms. Honestly, it's one of the less secluded areas that we'd ever been to, yet somehow it still managed to be the only place that's ever actually scared us. After setting up, we hiked for quite some time, going the distance and tiring ourselves out pretty good before the sun started making its way down. As we headed back to camp, I thought it was just me feeling a little strange, until my brother piped up from behind me. "What is that, you think? That sound?" I hadn't been hearing any sounds. It just felt like someone was near us, like we were being watched. I told him, "I don't hear anything, but let's pick up our pace." It wasn't but maybe 10 seconds that had passed when I hear something. It sounded like someone was above us, like maybe walking on the rocks or scaling them. In a few places, the trails dipped behind these rock formations, and I started feeling paranoid that someone was trying to keep themselves concealed behind them. My brother, on the other hand, took the noise to mean that there was just another hiker. "Oh, that's not the sound I heard earlier. That sounds like someone's hiking." We were both wrong. As we got closer to the end of the trail, where the other trail eventually feeds into it, it was pretty clear that there were no other hikers. I walked down the trail just a little bit, behind the rock wall. My brother was confused, asking me why I was heading that way. I told him I don't like the idea of someone hiding out here so close to our camp. But next he made a good point. The sun was going down quickly, and within a few minutes, we'd be out here in the dark, with no light source. We decide that we'll go back to the campsite, grab some flashlights, and come back just to be sure no one was hiding away. Back at the campsite, it was dark now. We'd set up some lanterns and took a flashlight with us to check the rocks. Before approaching the entrance of the trail, I heard something moving from above us. My brother does too, and we point our lights up, but we see nothing. I should clarify, my brother and I walking around the park after sundown, it's frowned upon. I started to feel a bit goofy though, searching for who knows what. And then we heard it again. It sounded like something was scaling the rock wall. But these weren't the kind of rocks that you could just climb. They were smooth and rounded in a way that would offer zero grip. And the sound, it didn't just happen and stop like before. It kept going. And now, standing at the entrance of the trail, the sound echoed. It was blatantly obvious. We looked at each other. His face shows me that we are still hearing the same sound. Our flashlights were now wildly bouncing around. We would have expected to at least see an animal, but there was nothing. Just the sound of something large scaling the rocks. Then, our flashlight catches the glimpse of something. It's only for a moment, but it's enough to end the search and send us running in the other direction. What we saw, it was something long, pale, skinny. It was almost transparent. It was a limb of some kind. It was unclear if it was an arm or a leg or what, but it definitely wasn't human. We ran. I kept looking back. I saw nothing, but we both heard a screech. A loud one. And look, I've got nothing to compare the screech to. I've heard screeching owls. I've heard bats, big cats, coyotes, people, tires, all the screeching things, and nothing has ever come close to what we heard. We didn't stay about another 10 minutes, packed up our gear, and decided to head back south, home. We'd make up for it about a month later, camping elsewhere. But at the time, there was nothing we wanted more than to just go home. We hardly even spoke until we'd been on the road for about an hour. Even then, we were silent with our theories for several years. No idea what we saw that night, but it was enough to send 2 grown men running. So, I don't think I'd choose to encounter or mess with that thing again. Any idea what we saw all those years ago? Has anyone else ever had strange experiences at Joshua Tree? This happened to me about 10 years ago when I was 14. It was a warm summer night in 2012. I was walking around the city with my friends, R, who was 16, and his older cousin Jay, 24. We'd all been neighbors for about 4 years now. Our families knew each other, so it was quite normal for us to all be hanging out together, despite the age gaps. During our walk, we decided to take a shortcut through the cemetery. It was after hours, and I'm pretty sure it was illegal for us to be there, but at the time, we weren't going to do anything other than just cut through, which we would often do during the day as well. As we were walking down the path, I saw headlights turn into the cemetery, and the boys, of course, darted away ahead of me into the trees. Since the others ran ahead of me and off the path, away from the lights, it was pitch black. There was residual light twinkling through the branches as I made my way down into the trees, but it dropped down to a slight hill, and the light was lost. I was walking along, trying to be as quiet as possible, almost blind due to my eyes not adjusting yet, and that's when the feeling of dread sets in. I had no idea where the guys were. I couldn't see, and I didn't want to be caught by the police by myself. But there was something else, almost a chill in the air on a warm July night. I tried to brush it off, the uneasy feeling, thinking it was just my nerves being scared because the guys took off without me. But alarms were going off in my head, like something was very, very wrong, and apart from legal reasons, I should not be there. I make out a shape to the left of me. As I'm walking, I take a couple of steps towards it. Guys, is that you? Nothing. No response. I take a few more steps towards it, and I swear to God, just like the movies, a freaking twig snaps under my foot. Now, The reason I had thought that it was the guys is because this shape was crouched down next to a pile of brush, and it was big enough to look like two people hunched over. I thought that they had been hiding there, but when the twig snapped, I stopped in my tracks as the thing stood up and towered over me. I was about 5 foot tall at the time, and this thing was easily two of me stacked right on top of each other. Whatever this thing was, it was only 15 feet or so away from me, and I was frozen in horror. It was facing away from me at first, and then its neck, its head, it almost swiveled around like an owl, and I was met with an oval-shaped gray face, no nose or mouth, only two pitch-black, hollow eye sockets. The rest of this thing's body was pitch black against the dark trees, the light from the path no longer streaming through the branches. It was just me and this thing that seemed like the personification of darkness itself. This thing and I stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. The woods around me, through the corners of my eyes, were getting darker. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it through my entire body. Every tiny hair on my body was prickling. I was cold. The only thing I can remember thinking was, this is it. I'm never going to see my family again. The body of this thing had followed its head and swiveled, so now I could see its long, curved arms held right up to what would be this thing's chest. Its legs were similarly curved, almost like it wasn't standing at full height, but still slightly crouched down. Its body was almost translucent. It looked like it was wearing some kind of hooded cloak that was see-through as well. The only thing that was 100% solid was its face and its void-like eyes that made me feel like I was staring right into the depths of hell. Neither of us moved. We were locked in the most terrifying staring contest. It felt like an eternity, until a strange feeling came over me. I felt like I could move again, and I had the energy to run a 5K marathon without breaking a sweat. Then I heard a very calm but stern voice say, "Go. Now. Run." It's kind of hard to explain where the voice was coming from exactly. It was sort of in my head, but all around at the same time. I'm getting chills as I write this. I know the voice did not come from whatever this thing was in front of me, because when I heard the voice speak, it looked as if this horrid creature recoiled at the sound of it, like it took a step or two backwards and kind of ducked its head down. I saw this as my chance, and I turned away from this thing, and I started bolting down further into the tree line, and no longer caring about being quiet and crashing around through the bush like an animal being chased by a predator. I could almost feel this thing right on my tail, but after running about 200 feet-ish, I run directly into the guys, literally crashing into them. I'm obviously scared and pissed, so I ask why the fuck they left me out there like that, and they apologized. Apparently, I'd been missing for almost a half an hour, and they'd already searched the direction I ran from. They heard weird whispering all around the woods while I was gone, like the voices were coming from everywhere around them. They said right before I crashed into them, the whispering stopped. I told them about what I saw, and all they said was that we should get out of there. We left the cemetery very quickly, and as soon as we walked out of the gates, it was like we all let out a sigh of relief. We never talked about that night again, and even during the day, none of us ever took that shortcut through the cemetery. I still live in the same city, and to this day, I avoid it like the plague. I won't even drive by it. This isn't my only story, but it's definitely one of the more terrifying ones that still haunts me to this day.